Okay, here is your 8-minute introduction to the Church of Saint Foy. Before we get into that church, I need to tell you where we are in history. We are in the early Middle Ages. Now, technically, you could say the Byzantine Empire is part of the early Middle Ages. It is, but we're looking at this section a little separately because we're back in Europe at this point, because with the Byzantine Empire, we're focused on Constantinople, right, which is in what is now Turkey. Yes, we looked at that church in Ravenna, which was part of the Byzantine Empire, but now we're going back into Europe. Okay, so what's going on at this point? So we have Charlemagne. He's crowned the Holy Roman Emperor at around 800 CE. If you remember our study of San Vitale and Hagia Sophia, that was in the 500s, 600s. Now we're at 800 CE. And so we're starting to take our steps out of the Dark Ages, our Dark Ages after the fall of the Roman Empire. And so what he begins to do in spreading the faith of Christianity is he begins to a massive church building campaign. And so in the church building campaign, he builds churches that are in the Roman style, which means, of course, they're going to follow a basilica plan, basically. So we're moving away from the centrally planned churches, which we associate with the Byzantine, and we're moving back into the basilica style churches that we associate first with Rome and then with early Christianity. Okay, so when we say Romanesque, because that's the style we're dealing with right now, okay, Romanesque style just means in the Roman manner. Roman manner, what does that mean? Lots and lots and lots of arches, lots of arches, okay, among other things, but, obviously following the basilica style. So when we talk about the Romanesque style, it's around the mid 11th to late 12th centuries. So, there we go. So there's a modification of the basilica style, though. It's not just the straight basilica style. There's some changes to it. Radiating chapels are added around the apse. I'll show you a photo or an image of this in just a moment, but we know the apse is on one end. That's where the altar is. That's where the most holy part of the church is. Behind the apse, there are smaller, tiny, radiating little petals coming off of the apse there. And with that is going to be an ambulatory. You're already familiar with the term ambulatory because we talked about ambulatories in centrally planned churches. Often also there are transepts added. Okay, transepts are perpendicularly oriented spaces added to the basic rectangular shape of the basilica. What that does is it helps, obviously, to increase the space available inside, but also suggests the form of a cross. The wooden roofs, which we saw in basilicas, are replaced with barrel vaults, which, of course, is a Roman thing that we associate with the Romans, right? And we have extremely heavy masonry. That means really big, thick, heavy stone walls. What does the masonry do? What does all this heavy masonry do? Well, it's better acoustics for all that beautiful singing and chanting, but also better protection against fire. Wooden roofs, they can burn down. Okay, so we need to talk about these Romanesque churches that Charlemagne helped sponsor the building of, and that continues after Charlemagne. They tend to be on pilgrimage routes, and we'll talk a little bit more about the particular pilgrimage route that Saint Foy was on. But all of these pilgrimage churches tend to follow the same cruciform plan, i.e. the shape of a cross. How does the cruciform plan work, or how does it come to be? It's from the addition of the transepts, okay? All right. I will show you pictures of all this in just a moment, all right? They also all tend to have tympanums, and here are tympanums. They're these semicircular spaces over the doorways, and they're filled with carvings, with relief carvings. And there's lots of heavy relief sculpture. So if you notice, when we look back at the early Christian and the Byzantine works that we didn't see any relief sculpture really, but we're back to have a relief sculpture with the Romanesque. We think of, the Romans also had relief sculpture, so that makes sense. And there's lots of it. And it also is on a hieratic scale. So we're bringing back the hieratic scale idea. Also, they tend to have square bell towers, these pilgrimage churches. Here, square bell tower. That's the square bell tower at Sainte Foy. All right, so we'll actually go over this in class, but all the things that I just said, what evidence do you see of the Romanesque style here? We'll get to that in just a moment. All right, so here's the image that I promised, right? We can see it's the basic basilica plan, right? We have the nave, we have an aisle, we have a, it's going to be an arcade here rather than a colonnade. Actually, is it going to even be, yeah. It's going to be an arcade, yes. And of course, above this, if we look at the interior, we can see it goes a bit higher, right? So that, of course, is where the clerestory is, and so with the clerestory windows, right? We have the apse here, but here are the additions, the transept, right? The transepts, which make it look more like a cross. We have, of course, the apse. Here are the radiating chapels that I spoke about, right? And the ambulatory that you can walk. So the idea here is that we want to build a church that allows a lot of people to get in and walk through and get out as well. So we have a west portal. They come through, they walk probably down the aisles. This is full of decoration, of course. And then they go to the various radiating chapels behind the apse, et cetera, et cetera. They pray, they leave offerings, et cetera, and then they exit. The altar is there. Okay, that is your very quick introduction to Romanesque with a brief talking about Sainte Foy. We'll go more into Sainte Foy when we get to class. All right, so terms are, again, radiating chapels, barrel vaults, ambulatories, transepts, cruciform plan, tympanum. We have heavy relief sculpture, bell towers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, thank you very much.